Hi everyone, this is a talk that we gave at the Alpine Education Series in 2025, and it's about aligning your mindset with the MSC Backcountry Conditions Report. So my name's Owen, and through winter I'm head guide at Thredbo Backcountry Tours, but I have a lot of early morning wake-ups assisting Craig Shepherd with the forecast for the Backcountry Conditions Reports, along with being on the MSC Volunteer Committee. So I'm going to be giving a quick update about our MSC Observations team, our Alpine Guiding Partners program, and then following that, I'm going to talk about recreating like a professional. That is to say, how to incorporate strategic mindsets into your daily process. At the end, I'm going to leave you with a little food for thought about something called the selection of desires. But before we get into that, let's just talk about MSC in 2025. So we've already had a strong core team of forecasters, and we've been together for several seasons now. But this year we've had more interest from qualified mountain folks to be a part of our field team than any other year as our younger members start skilling up professionally. It's a very talented group of people with backgrounds in ski patrolling, guiding, outdoor education, or a combination of all three. The forecasting team is largely unchanged for 2025. In New South Wales, we have myself assisting Craig Shepherd writing the majority forecasts, and we also have Tyson Reddy joining us from Canada, where he works as a forecaster for Avalanche Canada. And we also have Mimi G, who started stepping up last year, and she's going to continue doing that through this year too. In Victoria, we've got the dynamic duo of Kyle Boys and Dylan Robinson, and if you're heading their way, make sure you look for their reports. As I said, the field team all have experience in either guiding or ski patrolling, and everyone holds a professional level avalanche qualification from either Canada or New Zealand. Also, several of our team are members of the Canadian Avalanche Association, and I highlight this as I think it's important to enable us in Australia to stay in touch with the industry best practices from the country that many see as the global industry leader in avalanche forecasting. Members of the team continue to broaden their skills every year, and this past winter, 5 of us connected in Lake Louise in Alberta to complete our Avalanche Search and Rescue Level 2 course run by the Canadian Avalanche Association, which involved coordinating some very complex rescue scenarios. So we bring those skills back to Australia, and then we share them as part of our annual early season training with the rest of the MSC team. So I want to thank everyone here for advancing their professional skills and bringing them into MSC for the benefit of providing all of you as recreationalists with timely and accurate reporting about the backcountry. And then the other group of people we really need to raise a glass to are our Alpine guiding partners. Getting quality information from the field is one of the keys to a successful and accurate reporting program. And last year we formed an Alpine Guiding Partners program with several of the commercial operators in Victoria and New South Wales. We want to give a big shout out to Dave Herring from Alpine Access. Dave's advocated for an information sharing platform in Australia for some time, like they have in other countries. So in Canada, they have a system called InfoX, which is short for Information Exchange, and that started in the early 1990s from the suggestion of a coroner's report after a tragic incident. What the coroner recognised was that perhaps the accident could have been prevented had multiple operations been sharing their information with each other. So these days in Canada, all operators, whether it's ski areas, cat skiing, heli skiing, ski touring, and even some independent guides, input their daily field observations with a lens that sharing information benefits everyone and keeps their own clients safer. So last year, MSC put together a very rudimentary platform to facilitate this type of professional information sharing here in Australia. And what this meant for MSC last season was that we received 30 additional field observations from this program from our Alpine guiding partners. So a big thank you to these partners. And if you're looking for guides or courses this season, these are definitely the companies to be talking to. And one other group that needs recognition is you in the backcountry community. We are a collective after all. And last year, members of the public also submitted about 20 observations into our platform. There's definitely a few active members in the community that were very consistent in sharing what they were seeing while out and about. So in particular, a shout out to Dave Tweedy. You might know him as Capo from Thredbo. There's Rowan Kennedy out of Jindabyne. He's often just traversing the entire main range in a day. And then Lachlan Short has no fixed address, but he always seems to be where the good snow is. So if you have your own observations to share this season, please follow the QR code on screen or just scroll to the bottom of the Backcountry Conditions Report page. There's a link to submit your own public observations there, along with a link to a video running through all the kinds of things that we want to know about as forecasters. You definitely don't need to be an expert to do this. All level of information provide us with a bigger picture to make the daily reports even more accurate. And as you can see from this graph, what all of this increased data input meant overall was an increase in the field observations that we had, making our reporting much more accurate. So this is a great result, and we look forward to fostering these relationships moving into 2025. So with that update done, tonight I wanted to talk about two concepts that you should consider before you read our Backcountry Conditions Report. There's the strategic mindsets and the selection of desires. So strategic mindsets have been around in the professional industry for a while now, and their origin came about when a man called Roger Atkins wrote a paper called Yin, Yang, and You, and you can Google that if you want to read the full paper. The Canadian guiding industry quickly latched onto his idea and incorporated it into their operations, but it's equally valuable to us as recreationalists. So in total, he identified 7 principal mindsets that his team naturally adopted in their heli skiing operations. And these 7 mindsets are assessment, stepping out, stepping back, status quo, entrenchment, open season, and the final one is spring diurnal. So before we get into the specifics of what these different mindsets mean, it's worth noting that the use of them is obviously not a substitute for diligent observations and assessments when you're out there in the field yourself. However, they are a strategy of intentional manipulation of our own human behavior that works to our benefit. So really, it's intended to work in conjunction with our other processes. The advantage of adopting a strategic mindset is that the choices that fit within that mindset often require relatively little effort, while choices that are out of character with the mindset demand much more careful assessment. And as you might have seen in this daily process chart, having a process like this is really important to our backcountry travel, and professionals, just like recreationalists, we go through a daily process, and strategic mindsets are a part of our pre-trip planning. So let's dig into what each mindset means. Firstly, there's assessment. When we're not in the mountains on a regular basis, I find we often have this mindset, and it's characterized by a high degree of uncertainty about conditions. This could be our first time encountering certain terrain for the season, or when we're entering into completely new terrain for the first time. It could be following a lengthy period with limited observations, such as when there's days and days of whiteout conditions in the Alpine, and people just haven't been able to get out there and get good observations. Or it could be after a substantial weather event when there's been a big new snowfall or a warming event or some rain. So in essence, there's been a lot of change since I last went out, so I'm not 100% certain of what is out there. I'm going to start cautiously and gather information as I go. A lot of the time I'm finding if I'm going into the field for MSC, I have this assessment mindset. I am, after all, looking for information that either refutes a synopsis or confirms what we think is going on. And in this mindset, I don't feel the need to push out into terrain. I feel the need to gather information. Excuse me. Speaking of pushing into terrain, the next mindset is stepping out. A stepping out mindset comes when conditions are improving and or we're gaining confidence in the snowpack, the surface conditions, or the weather. And we step out, we can step out cautiously or confidently. A cautious stepping out happens when we still have limited confidence in extrapolation from available observations, whereas a confident stepping out comes when we're confident to extrapolate from those available observations. Or another way to look at it is how much quality evidence do we have from the field? To me, confidence is a factor of this evidence. Quite simply, the more consistent and widespread the evidence is, the more confident I become and the more willing I am to step out. Just as a quick aside, we often talk about the strength and weight of evidence. So the strength of evidence is how much evidence do we have, and the weight of evidence is how much do we believe in that evidence. So did one of the Alpine guiding partners put a professional observation into our InfoX? I can give that a lot of weight. Conversely, if I'm in a bar and I overhear a conversation about an incident that someone's cousin's friend told their girlfriend about, how much weight can I give that? Not a whole lot. Then we've got stepping back. So this is a mindset that we adopt when weather changes increase the hazard or when observations cause uncertainty about the current assessment. It could be a small step back due to a minor or a subtle weather change, or it could be a large step back due to substantial weather changes. Another aspect to this can be complexity. The more complicated things become, the harder it is to predict the outcomes. And one option is to step it back in your terrain selection or objectives. Here in Australia, I find we step it back when the weather comes in and we're stuck in a whiteout, and the best thing to do is get back down. Then we have status quo. So this mindset is when there's no substantial change, the evidence continues to support the current hazard assessment. So things are not getting better, nor are they getting worse. And as such, we don't have the confidence to step out, but at the same time, we don't feel the need to step back. We're comfortable with that status quo, even though there might be some kind of persistent hazard there. And an interesting thing about this mindset is that if you're working in a guiding operation or you're coming back from a week where you haven't been into the mountains, being in a status quo mindset may not be enough information. You might not know what that actual status quo is, and as such, it's always important that you delve deeper into this mindset and discuss it with your team or your friends about what they think that status quo is. And I want to note here that if you just haven't been into the mountains yourself for a week or more, check the last few days of the MSC Backcountry Conditions Reports. There's an archive link at the bottom of each report, and this will provide you with a very strong picture of what's been happening in the days leading up to the day that you're heading out on your backcountry tour. Then we have entrenchment. So this mindset is typically when we're dealing with a well-established instability. For example, a classic persistent weak layer in the snowpack. These are usually the result of early season snow followed by some rain, and then that layer then gets buried by new snow throughout the season. So these persistent weak layers can plague a snowpack for lengthy periods, and as such, we are in an entrenchment mindset concerned about that weak layer. So during these times, we stick to safe terrain and we use the same terrain over and over again. We're entrenched in that terrain because we just don't have confidence in stepping out at all. And here in Australia, like in the picture on the screen, another example of entrenchment is when there's week after week of surface ice. This was terrible in 2023, so let's hope we don't see that again this year. And on the flip side, we have open seasons. So the hazard is low, there's good visibility, there's no surface ice. We might have seen some small avalanches in isolated terrain, but we're not concerned about them. So effectively, we have Goldilocks conditions, just right. And as such, there's a high degree of confidence in the snowpack, and if it's white, we can ride it. And there are times in the mountains that conditions lend themselves to an open season mindset, but depending on the season, these days can be quite finite. So definitely grab them while we can. And then the last mindset is spring diurnal. So this mindset is when we have a predictable melt-freeze cycle, typically found in spring, although to be fair, this can happen at any time through winter in Australia. Generally speaking, when I'm in this mindset, I'm thinking that in the morning, things are going to be refrozen and locked up. So ski crampons might be necessary for early morning travel, but my goal is to ski or ride the slopes just as they start to soften in the sun before the main heat of the day gets into them. And by the afternoon, conditions start to deteriorate into slush. From an avalanche perspective, the only substantial hazard is from wet loose avalanches during the afternoon thaw phase. And from a surface conditions perspective, slide for life conditions on ice primarily exist early, but of course they might remain a concern all day on shaded slopes. Broadly, there are three spring diurnal scenarios. Firstly, it's possible to have all freeze and no melt. The day remains cloudy and cold enough that things don't soften, and slide for life conditions on ice persist throughout the day. Secondly, we might have all melt and no freeze. So this happens if temperatures overnight stay warm and maybe there's cloud cover which prevents the snowpack from losing any heat, and as such conditions can deteriorate more rapidly with daytime warming and solar input. The last scenario is the quintessential spring setup that I started talking about that fits this mindset. So that classic melt freeze cycle of cold nights and mild to warm days, and if you time it right, is perfect for good corn skiing harvest. So in summary, these mindsets, it's good to have a chat with your group and check in with how they're feeling. What is their mindset? What is your mindset? Are they the same? Do they differ? And why? But also I want to note that strategic mindsets are not limited to just these 7. There can be an infinite number of mindsets that you might just make up as you go. And a mindset I often think of in Australia is froth. But I'd be mindful of a froth mindset because it could lead to having the blinders on and just not seeing the bigger picture of what's going on. Because remember, regardless of your mindset, it's critical to keep your eyes open and an open mind so that you combat confirmation bias. That is seeing what we want to see and ignoring anything that contradicts that. And that's when we get into trouble. And then the last thing I want to touch on briefly is a concept called selection of desires, another thing that came out of Roger Atkins' paper, Yin, Yang, and You. And if we consider the traditional view of dealing with risk is to adjust our behavior based on the hazard so that we are within an acceptable level of risk. Perhaps an alternative way of managing risk is to actually deliberately adjust our underlying desires to suit the conditions. So a desire is obviously a strong feeling of wanting to have something or wishing for something to happen. What do we want to experience when we're in the backcountry? And the idea of a selection of desires is that we should identify within ourselves a quiver of the types of things that bring us pleasure in the backcountry. We can then choose to fulfill one of these desires that matches the conditions that we find in the mountains on the day. Because as we all know, not every day in the mountains is going to be open season. So to explain a little further, if we have one desire to fulfill in the mountains, let's say it's just to ski steep and deep, then we're always going to be looking for the steepest and deepest runs given the hazard on the day. This is a bias towards steep and deep skiing. It's neither good or bad, but it depends on context. Under some conditions, it's fine, but under other conditions, it might nudge us too close to our acceptable level of risk. So this is another way of looking at how we can deal with risk. The first step is to acknowledge our own personal desires. What are they? Do we want to ski steep and deep? Of course, but what else? Is it about improving your fitness, spending time with friends, doing a big traverse out to some new terrain like out at Jagungal? You might be interested in doing some photography or learning some new technical skills like playing with snow crystals, digging snow profiles, or playing with ropes. So just realizing that you have multiple desires that you can fulfill while in the mountains. Then once you've read our daily backcountry conditions report, think about which desire can be fulfilled given those conditions. That is our selection of desires. So before I go, just make sure you follow MSC on social media and bookmark the Backcountry Conditions Report so you can get the latest updates free every day throughout the snow season. You can literally keep MSC in your pocket. And don't forget that we have our membership drive running all season this year with prize draws in June, July, and August. Thanks for listening.